All right, next up, let's bring in General Jack Keane, retired four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst and chair of the Institute for the Study of War, and our great pal Bill Hemmer, taking some time out. He's the co-anchor of America's Newsroom on Fox News. All right, Bill, first up, can you give us an update on the map and what's happening in the rest of Ukraine?
Give you a bit of an overview of the past 48 hours or so, and General Keane can follow up and clarify or fill in any of the blanks here, Larry. But I'll just advance at one time. Listening to Mike Tobin's report, this is the area about 10, 15 miles from the Polish border here where this training center is set. That's the border here. And this is the location that Mike was describing about people on the Polish side of the border being able to record the explosion with their cell phones. So you can imagine just what sort of an explosion was set off. I bring this up because Mike's position here, and a lot of our reporters have been in Lviv, on the western side of the country. Last Friday, Larry, there were two hits, by the way. Ivano-Frankivsk to the southeast, that's about 90 miles, and Lutsk to the northeast, which is about 90 miles as well, equidistant just about from the town of Lviv. Why is that significant? Because the Russians have not chosen to hit here until the last couple of days. That's what's happening there in the western part of the country. This is the center part of Kyiv. We woke up this morning, Larry, and this is the Dnieper River that flows through here, quite broad, and we've denoted a lot of bridges here. The reason we're looking at that, Larry, if it comes to it and Kyiv is under siege, this is a very wide river. Below the river here, it goes about a mile wide. This area here, I guess about a half a mile. These bridges are substantial, so keep an eye on that militarily. But this is the main airport that was hit on the initial night 19 days ago. That's where Putin thought you make the quick strike, you make this area your setup area, and you're able to come from the city from the northwest. Well, that has not happened because the Ukrainians fought back. However, overnight, this aircraft production unit was shelled as well. That's where they make these giant Antonov cargo planes, some of the largest cargo planes you find in the entire world. So that was happening in the capital city. Down here in the south, there's a lot to talk about, Larry. I'll just run through it quickly, all right? Note over here, and I'd love to hear what General Keane has to say about this. The town of Odessa, founded 1795, Catherine the Great, has not been touched yet. Why is that? It's hard to get inside of Putin's mind, all right? But right now, it has not been hit. On the far eastern side, this is Mariupol. And man, Larry, for more than a week now, people living there, trying to survive, food and water. And just the shelling, well, food and water that is not there, and the shelling that has been there from the north and also from the Sea of Azov just to its southern coast as well. All this area dominated now by the Russian military over in Kherson as well, and Mykolaiv. There was some video online on Saturday and Sunday where you saw these buildings just getting pounded one after the other. So down here in the south, a lot of activity. You see this red and sort of orange stripe here. These are areas where the advancing forces have gone into these smaller country towns. You can see little country roads here and taken occupation of these areas here, yet still contested though too. And I'll just show you one more map, Larry, because we believe everything you see here. Let me clear that off and see if I can jump on down here. In the south, can't do it. Hang on 1 second. One more time. Three's a charm. See every blue dot here, Larry? Okay. This is denoted by Ukrainian protests. And we have seen the video, right? In towns like Melitopol, right? That was taken over just a few days ago. There are people by the hundreds, if not thousands, in the streets that are protesting the mayor who was taken into captivity on behalf of the Russian soldiers. So there are, even though there's a lot of red on the map, we just want to make sure the audience knows that every blue dot you see here is a sign of resistance on behalf of the Ukrainian people. So broadly speaking, Larry, that's what we believe is the state of play today.
Ukrainians are fighting back like all get out.
That they are.
All get out.
And the more equipment and the more munitions they get, they will fight harder, Larry.
All right, thank you. Bill's going to join me on set in a moment. We're going to talk to General Keane. General Keane, one of Bill's Hemmer's questions was, why are they leaving Odessa alone, but they're killing Mariupol? Do you have any idea what that means?
Yeah, well, the problem is that their attacks have stalled. What they have done is they have certainly increased their attacks on civilian population, and we've seen the tragic results of that. But all their attacks against the Ukrainian military They made no territorial gains at all over this entire weekend. And the point dealing with Odessa is the problem is the land force that's trying to move towards Odessa, leaving Kherson and trying to move through Mykolaiv, those forces are stalled. And as a result of that, the amphibious forces that were in place off the shore of Odessa have pulled away. I don't think we're going to see an assault on Odessa until those land forces are successful. They'll bring the amphibious forces back who have naval and infantry with them. The purpose of Odessa, certainly, is to cut off all of the access to the sea for the Ukrainians, and that would be devastating to them in terms of their economy. Once Mariupol, if and when it falls, they will have established a land bridge that they've always wanted to Crimea that they were never able to achieve back in 2014.
You know, General Keane, we talked about this briefly this weekend on the radio. I mean, I'm not going to say the Ukrainians are winning, but I think it's safe to say, at least so far, the Ukrainians have not lost. And I think it's safe to say the Russians have not won. And I think it's safe to say that the Russian army, I call it the Red Army. People say I shouldn't call it the Red Army, but I'm going to call it the Red Army, has, I believe your word is underperformed. That's a very diplomatic way of saying they haven't gotten the job done. And a lot of their soldiers who don't want to be there in the first place are fleeing. I mean, I'd say Ukraine's looking okay. And that's another reason why I think the United States should give them every darn thing they want. Airplanes, Stinger missiles, more money, whatever. I don't know if Russia's on the run, but Ukraine is still there. That's my point. Ukraine is still there. We're 3 weeks into that.
No, that's an accurate characterization. They're not losing, the Ukrainians. And the Russians are certainly stunned by what's happening to them. When you take the main effort, which Kyiv is, and they've been working on this now for 16 days to try to get in position in the northern outskirts of the city so they can move down on the east and west side with artillery. They cannot do it. The Ukrainians are not only holding back that combat arms force, but they're attacking their supply lines. And it brings into question, when we analyze this at the Institute for the Study of War, it brings into question whether that main effort that they're conducting can be successful at all. Because we're not confident that they can get down and fight through two mechanized brigades that the Ukrainians have in place to defend, plus some other things that they have there. This is what's happening to the Russians is what actually happened to them in Operation Barbarossa when the Germans invaded Russia. They were attacking all their long supply lines and eroding the ability of their forward combat forces to be sustained. The Ukrainians are doing this to the Russians all over Ukraine, but particularly on those very long supply lines that are feeding into Kyiv on 3 different axes. So that is contributing to the success. And those Russian forces along those supply lines, Larry, they actually are in the defense because the Ukrainians are attacking them. And at night, they're raiding them. They have night vision goggles. And for some reason, the Russians are blind. They don't have their thermal imagery and their night vision capability. We gave them the credit for having that. And the Ukrainians are actually having an advantage at night over the Russians.
You know, I just am going to speculate, General. This is a time for the U.S. to say to Putin, we are going to give them all the money they need, all the weaponry they need. This argument about old MiGs in Poland going to Ukraine is silly. We should have okayed it in the first place. Now's the time to okay it. And we should say to Putin, it is time for you to understand how badly you are losing. The costs are enormous, and you need to sit down at the peace table right away. You need to start serious negotiations at the peace table. And the U.S. should play a big role in that because we make it clear that we, the U.S. and NATO, but the U.S. in particular, is backing Ukraine. No saber rattling, no saber rattling. Putin can saber rattle. It's time for us to stand up and saber rattle back.
No, I totally agree with that. And we should have had very stronger positions rhetorically than what we've had. And certainly letting Putin sort of force self-deterrence on ourselves like we've done, as you accurately pointed out with the MiGs, is an absolute absurdity here. Look at Putin. Certainly at some point, if this military operation continues on the path it's on, he is going to be looking for some kind of off-ramp, because he's not going to get the capitulation of the Zelensky government, and he's going to want to own something more than what he came into this fight with, before because he wants to have a win of some kind. But I believe going into those negotiations, given he's on his heels, that the West will have the leverage in those negotiations,
right?
Because of what we're describing on this battlefield every single day. And let's take advantage of that and stand up, put the big boy pants on, and deal with this thing the way we should.
I love that, the big boy pants. So, Bill Hemmer, there have been talks. Now, they're somewhat ambiguous talks, and they're somewhat circuitous talks, meaning you've got the Israeli prime minister talking to Zelensky, but also talking to Putin.
Yes.
I'm sorry, John. I'm just talking to Bill Hemmer here for a moment. Have him join the conversation.
The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz involved in this too.
A little
Macron
bit
from France.
A little bit.
Where's the United States in all this?
That's it. That's my question. Erdogan in Turkey is involved a little bit, but the United States is not playing the role that we need to be playing.
I don't disagree with that. I think the other thing, when you talk about, what do you win from a war like this? I don't know what Putin wins, and I don't know if you can negotiate him back out of Ukraine, because what Zelensky's going to demand is that all the Russian troops leave. That's not going to happen. They're going to keep certain territories, whether it's what I showed you on the map or maybe something in addition to that. They talk about these talks, Larry. Last week, here were the 4 conditions on behalf of Moscow. Recognize Crimea and the Donbass. Well, we are well beyond that right now, based on the territory they've taken. No to NATO. No to the EU, and at one point they said, keep your military no larger than 60,000 forces, 60,000 soldiers. Is Zelensky going to take that deal after he's watching his country get crushed? And I think about the rubble that we're seeing these towns reduced to. Don't think Putin's going to stop here. You think at some point he's going to say, okay, I'm done now? I don't think so, Larry. After Aleppo and after Grozny, those were, in my view, like the American public looked at those theaters as somewhere on the other side of the world. The problem now is that with Ukraine, those refugees are going to Poland, and they're going to the Czech Republic, and pretty soon they're going to be going to Germany, and they're going to come here to the United States. Those places are much more familiar to the American people than Aleppo was in Syria or Grozny was in Chechnya.
Which is a problem for Putin.
It's a problem for Putin. And it's a problem for Biden, too, based on the position he has right now. And just to finish the point, is that this pressure is going to build in Washington. You see a little bit out on behalf of some of the Democratic politicians today about selling the MiGs. America understands Germany. America understands Poland. And the more refugees who are sent there, right, to start a new life, and we saw some stunning video from earlier today in Italy. 2 young girls. I'll say they were 7 years old, Larry. They showed up at an elementary school in Italy, terrified, starting to begin a new life. You know what that school did? Every kid in that school was standing on the banister and on the floor and on the steps on both sides with a standing ovation and welcoming them. Okay? So this is now what the West is going to feel. And the pressure is only going to get higher from here for Biden to give the Ukrainian military the support it needs.
That's it. By the way, that's a wonderful, heartbreaking story. I've got to hold my tears back on that. General Keane, we'll give you the last word on this, sir. Because the whole world is watching, I just want to see, this is me talking, you're the expert, not me, but Putin has to understand with great clarity that he is up against the United States. We're not putting troops on the ground in Ukraine, okay? I get that. I don't advocate that. But he's got to understand, this is not a part-time job, this is a full-time job. American and NATO assistance to Ukraine to stop Putin. And that Putin's costs are going to be very, very, very high. And the Ukrainians already have distinguished themselves against all odds. And that's why I want us, I forget what you just said. Put your big boy pants on. That's exactly my position here. I don't want to attack my president. I want to bolster my president. I want my president to act like the leader of the free world, as we used to say, or the leader of the greatest country on this planet, and make sure that Putin knows ultimately that he's going to fail. He's going to fail, General Keane. Sooner or later, Putin and his crazy vision, phantasmagoric vision, will fail. That's all. He's got to understand that. We're not saying that in so many words, but we should be. I give you the last word, sir.
No, well, he's certainly heading towards strategic failure for sure, because there's no way that Putin could ever occupy Ukraine. And he actually may fail militarily as well, given all the problems he's having. And I totally agree with you. I mean, this is a moment we've got to double down on the assistance that we're giving them and listen carefully to what they need. What we just witnessed that Bill briefed so accurately there is they delivered air-land cruise missiles from Russian airspace, flew them into western Ukraine, and delivered all of those missiles without having been in Ukraine airspace. So what defeats that? MiG fighters don't defeat it. American fighters don't defeat that. A no-fly zone doesn't defeat that. What defeats that is integrated air defense systems, which the Ukrainians already have, and they are screaming for more of them. Get them to them, either clandestinely, but get them to them. And the second thing that they need is all the other equipment that we've been giving them. Listen, there's two things out there that are succeeding. One is the absolute commitment and will and determination of the Ukrainian military, backed by the same resolve of their people, and the NATO arms and munitions that we're giving them. Those two things combined are achieving the success that they're having. And we got to be all in. I totally agree with, and we got to talk about being all in.
Yes, that's what I want.
It's not just about preventing World War III. It's about being all in to save Ukraine. That's what we're all in about, saving Ukraine.
Don't tell me why not. Tell me why. Don't tell me why not the U.S. can't do stuff. I'm going to tell you, the president, whoever, why we can and will defeat. We will defeat Putin. We will defeat him. We should just be talking about that. Anyway, General Jack Keane, as always, sir, thank you. You illuminate all of this. Bill Hammers had to go to another show, but we thank Bill for his fabulous stuff on the board to lay it out for us. And we also thank Mike Tobin.